Every morning, 11-year-old Mason Bennett walked the frosty path to his elementary school in the quiet town of Evergreen, Colorado. What made his mornings extraordinary wasn't the snow-covered mountains or the scent of pine in the air, it was the silent shadow that followed him. A baby bobcat, no bigger than a house cat, with pale golden fur and deep emerald eyes, had chosen Mason as its companion. No one believed him, until the day the Wildcat did something unthinkable. When a speeding car barreled around the bend, the creature lunged into the road, and what happened next would break hearts and reveal a bond no one could explain. The Golden Shadow. Some bonds aren't forged by words or touch, but by the silence between two beating hearts. The town of Evergreen, Colorado, woke up each morning beneath a veil of soft mist and pine-scented air. Nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, it was the kind of place where days moved slower, and every face was familiar. But even in a town that seemed to know all its stories, one would soon unfold that no one saw coming. At exactly 7:10 every morning, 11-year-old Mason Bennett stepped out of the faded red door of his family's cedarwood cabin. He wore a puffy green coat zipped up to his chin, cargo jeans fraying at the knees, and black rubber boots that squeaked with every step. His brown hair was always a little too messy, and his glasses, slightly crooked on his narrow face, kept slipping down his nose as he trudged down the snow-dusted path toward Evergreen Elementary. Mason was small for his age. Quiet. The kind of boy who listened more than he spoke, who found comfort in the whispering woods more than the chatter of classmates. His mother, Rachel Bennett, a nurse working double shifts at the county hospital, often worried about how much time Mason spent alone. But Mason didn't mind. Because on the way to school, somewhere between the third pine tree past the creek and the wooden fence that marked the border of the hiking trail, he was never truly alone. It had started 2 weeks ago. Just as the sun peeked over the ridge and painted the snowbanks gold, Mason had heard it. The soft crackle of twigs. The hush of fur brushing against bark. He'd spun around, heart racing, expecting a raccoon or maybe a stray dog. But instead, emerging cautiously from the underbrush, was a creature he'd only ever seen in books. It was a wildcat, a bobcat kitten, no bigger than a house cat but with legs slightly longer and a tail that ended in a distinct black tip. Its fur was a golden beige, dusted with flecks of charcoal along its back and with faint stripes running down its legs. 2 dark ear tufts flicked nervously at every sound, and its large eyes, green, piercing, curious, locked onto Mason's. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Mason took a small step forward. The wildcat didn't run. It watched. And when Mason turned and continued walking, he glanced back just once and saw it padding quietly behind him, never too close, never too far. The next day, it returned. And the next. By the 5th morning, Mason had given it a name, Lumen. Because in the golden light of dawn, that wildcat shimmered like something made of sunlight. Lumen never made a sound. He didn't meow or growl or purr. He followed Mason all the way to the edge of the school property, where a wooden fence marked the start of the schoolyard. There, Lumen would sit, perfectly still beneath a cluster of tall spruce trees, and wait. After school, when Mason walked home, Lumen would fall into step behind him once again. Mason never told anyone. Not his mom. Not the bus driver. Not even Ms. Ramirez, his warm but overly watchful teacher, who once scolded him for writing about imaginary creatures in a journal assignment. This, whatever this was, felt too special to share. Instead, Mason began leaving small offerings in his coat pocket. Bits of turkey from last night's sandwich. A slice of dried apple. Once, half of a granola bar. He'd crouch near the trail and leave the food on a flat rock just off the path. Lumen always waited until Mason walked a few feet away before creeping forward and accepting the gift with careful grace. Their ritual was simple. Unspoken. And every day, the bond deepened. Still, Mason couldn't help but wonder, why him? Lumen could have followed anyone. There were hikers, joggers, even hunters in the woods. But every morning, it was Mason the Wildcat chose. He sometimes imagined what it would be like to tell the other kids at school. To show them proof that a bobcat walked with him each day like a silent guardian. But the thought of camera flashes and curious adults crowding the trail made his stomach turn. Lumen didn't belong to the world. He belonged to the trees, the silence, the space between snowflakes. And somehow, to Mason. But not everything stays hidden forever. One gray Wednesday morning, as the snow turned slushy beneath his boots and the wind stung his cheeks, Mason was almost at the schoolyard when a voice called out behind him. "Hey! What is that?" He turned around just in time to see Ms. Ramirez standing beside her car, squinting into the woods. Her eyes narrowed as she caught the briefest glimpse of Lumen's golden fur slipping into the brush. "Was that a cat?" she asked, approaching slowly. "Or something else?" Mason shrugged, heart thudding. "I think it ran off." She frowned. "You need to be careful, Mason. We've had reports of wild animals getting too close lately." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Ms. Ramirez looked unconvinced, but let it go. Mason continued walking, his breath fogging the cold air. His eyes darted to the trees, but Lumen was gone. For the first time, Mason felt a strange chill, not from the weather, but from the fear that his secret was slipping away. That afternoon, when he walked home, Lumen didn't appear. The trail felt emptier than it ever had before. But the next morning, just as the sun broke the edge of the hills, Lumen was there. Waiting. Silent. Still loyal. And as Mason met those eyes, calm, wild, and fierce in their quiet understanding, he felt a sense of peace return to him. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or dangers waited in the world, he knew one thing. He wasn't alone. Lumen's loyalty. Friendship grows in secret. Trust doesn't need to be spoken, it's in every step taken side by side. It began with a glance. Then a shadow. Then, a presence Mason Bennett came to rely on more than he realized. The bobcat was there every morning, just after the first bend in the trail. He didn't meow, didn't growl, didn't purr. He simply followed. And Mason, in turn, began to expect him. Their walks became synchronized, like an unspoken dance. Boy and Wildcat. Step and paw. Lumen wasn't just following anymore, he was choosing Mason, every single day. Snow had settled over Evergreen by then. It crunched beneath Mason's boots as he made his way to school, breath fogging the air in little white puffs. He wore his usual forest green coat zipped high and a blue knit beanie his mother had made 2 winters ago. Behind him, the soft shuffle of paws trailed faithfully. At first, Mason had been nervous. A bobcat, even a baby one, was still a wild animal. He remembered reading once that they could leap 10 feet in a single bound, that they had claws strong enough to take down prey much larger than themselves. But Lumen never made him feel afraid. There was something steady in the cat's gaze. Something watchful. Respectful, even. The first time Mason left food, it was a piece of his sandwich, cold turkey on wheat, no mayo. He placed it carefully on a rock just off the path, then backed away and waited. Lumen approached slowly, sniffed, and took it with delicate precision. He didn't bolt afterward. He just stood still, as if to say, thanks. From that day on, it became their ritual. Every morning, Mason would bring something from home, bits of scrambled egg, slices of apple, half a granola bar. He kept the food wrapped in a paper napkin tucked inside his coat pocket. And every morning, Lumen would take it. Never greedily. Never with a snarl. Just quietly. Mason began to whisper to him. Not full conversations, just fragments of thoughts he never shared with anyone else. Complaints about school. Hopes. Silly jokes. Questions like, "Do you have a family out here?" or "Why me?" He never expected answers. But it felt good to say the words out loud. Sometimes, Lumen would tilt his head slightly, his large green eyes blinking slow, as if he was listening. Understanding. At school, Mason kept the secret locked inside. He told no one. He knew what would happen if he did. Wildlife officers. Traps. Fearful parents. People who wouldn't understand that this bobcat wasn't dangerous, that he was something else. Something good. Lumen never followed Mason past the edge of the school's wooden fence. As if he knew the boundary, the invisible line that separated the world they shared from the one Mason had to return to. He would wait in the shadows of the spruce trees, quiet and patient. And every afternoon, when Mason returned, Lumen was there again, pacing softly behind him all the way home. It wasn't just a pattern anymore. It was a bond. Something deeper than Mason had ever felt. Deeper than friendship. It was loyalty in its rawest, simplest form. It didn't need words. It didn't need touch. Just presence. And for Mason, that presence made the cold mornings warmer. The walks to school less lonely. And the world, somehow, safer. Lumen's loyalty, tension builds, adults begin to notice. The world fears what it doesn't understand, especially when it's something wild and good. It was bound to happen. Secrets have a way of unraveling, no matter how carefully they're held. It started on a Tuesday morning. The air was sharp, the sky a pale blue canvas streaked with white. Mason was just about to reach the schoolyard when a car door slammed behind him. He turned around and saw Mr. Larson, the school janitor, standing beside his salt spreader. The old man squinted into the tree line. "Thought I saw something back there," he muttered, pointing toward the snowy brush. "Coyote, maybe." Mason's breath caught. Just a second before, Lumen had slipped into the shadows near the fence, as he always did. "I didn't see anything," Mason said quickly. Mr. Larson frowned but didn't press. That afternoon, it happened again. Ms. Ramirez, the fifth-grade homeroom teacher, was standing at the front doors with a cup of coffee, chatting with the school counselor. Her gaze drifted toward the forest, and lingered. "There," she said, narrowing her eyes. "Did you see that? I think it was a bobcat." Mason's heart sank. The next day, the principal made an announcement over the loudspeaker during morning attendance. "Attention students and staff, we've had a confirmed sighting of a juvenile bobcat near the school. Please don't approach it if you see it, and report any sightings immediately." Mason sat frozen in his chair. Around him, classmates murmured. "A bobcat," someone whispered. "Like, claws and fangs? They eat rabbits and stuff. What if it comes near the playground? I heard they scream like women at night." Mason said nothing. But inside, he felt like he was sitting on top of a volcano about to erupt. That afternoon, as he walked home, Lumen followed as usual. But Mason didn't speak to him. His thoughts were too tangled. Too loud. When he got home, his mom was waiting at the kitchen table with a serious look on her face. "Mason," she began gently, "did you hear about the bobcat?" He nodded, avoiding her eyes. She tapped the countertop nervously. "The school called. They're concerned. Wildlife officers might get involved. They don't want kids walking alone right now." "I've never seen it," Mason said too quickly. Rachel studied him. She was tired, he could see it in her eyes, but she wasn't distracted. "Not this time. I want you to take the bus, just until they figure things out," she said. But, Mason stopped himself. He couldn't explain why the bus felt so wrong. Why the idea of not walking the trail with Lumen made his chest ache. He forced a nod. "Okay." But he knew he wouldn't. On Thursday, things escalated. A local wildlife officer named Cliff Darrow came to the school. He stood in front of the 5th grade classes with a fold-out poster of Colorado's native predators. Bobcats aren't usually dangerous, he told the students. But they are wild. If you see one, don't run. Don't feed it. Don't try to take pictures. A student raised her hand. Will you catch it? If it gets too close to humans, yes. We'll have to relocate it. Or worse, if it acts aggressive. Mason's blood ran cold. He thought of Lumen's eyes, calm, intelligent, unthreatening. Of how he'd never once growled or snarled. Of how he always waited, never crossed the school fence. He wasn't aggressive. But none of that would matter if they saw him. That evening, Mason sat on his bed, the room dim except for the glow of his desk lamp. His math homework lay untouched. He stared at the snow collecting outside his window and whispered, "They're going to take you away." Something clenched in his chest. A fear deeper than he'd ever felt. He didn't know how to stop it. But one thing was clear, his secret was slipping. And the world beyond their quiet trail was coming closer every day. Lumen's loyalty, the last peaceful morning. The heart always knows when it's the last time, even if the mind refuses to believe it. Saturday arrived cloaked in quiet beauty. The air was still, the snow untouched, soft powder glistening under early sunlight. Mason slipped on his boots, pulled his green coat tight, and crept out of the cabin before his mother woke. He didn't leave a note. He just needed to see him. The trail was hushed except for the distant whisper of wind rustling through pine needles. Every step Mason took left deep, perfect footprints in the snow behind him. As he crossed the narrow wooden bridge by the frozen creek, he scanned the edge of the woods. Then, from the right, almost like clockwork, Lumen appeared. His pale gold coat gleamed in the morning light. Tufts of snow clung to his legs. He moved with grace, his wide paws barely making a sound as he stepped forward, stopping a few feet away. Mason smiled despite himself. "I thought you might be gone." Lumen blinked once, head tilting. He said nothing, he never did, but the way he stood there, solid and calm, was its own reply. Mason reached into his coat and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside, 3 slices of roasted chicken. Leftovers from dinner, saved just for this. He knelt and laid them on the flattest rock beside the trail, then sat down cross-legged in the snow a few feet back. Lumen approached with quiet confidence, sniffed the offering, and began to eat. The sound of soft chewing was the only noise between them for a long stretch of stillness. Mason's breath clouded the air. His hands rested on his knees. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. But eventually, he spoke. "They're looking for you." Lumen paused mid-chew, then continued slowly. Mason swallowed hard. "People are scared. They think you're dangerous." The Wildcat finished the last bite and licked his lips clean. Then he sat, just like he always did. Perfectly still, front paws together, tail curled. Watching. Listening. Mason looked at him. "I don't think they understand that you're more than that." He hesitated, then added, "You've never hurt me. Never scared me." Lumen's eyes met his. There was something in that gaze, familiar, unspoken, deep. Not just the stare of an animal. Something else. Something that said, "I know you." Mason shifted in the snow, the cold beginning to nip through the fabric of his jeans. I think you came into my life because I needed you. Because I was lonely and lost and quiet, and you were the only one who didn't ask me to be anything else." The silence that followed felt sacred. Then, like a flicked switch, Lumen's head snapped up. His ears stood tall. His body stiffened. Mason followed his gaze, but he saw nothing. No sound. No movement. Still, Lumen's posture didn't relax. His paws shifted in the snow. His eyes stayed fixed on the trail ahead. A warning. A signal. Mason's breath caught. What is it? But Lumen didn't answer. He took one step backward. Then another. Then turned and darted off into the woods, vanishing behind a thicket of snow-covered brush. Mason stood, stunned, still staring at the empty space where his wild friend had stood. It felt different. This wasn't how Lumen usually left. He didn't linger this time. Didn't look back. And Mason's chest filled with something he didn't have a name for, part sadness, part dread, part knowing. He walked home slower than usual, scanning the trees for any flicker of movement, any flash of golden fur. But the woods were still. That night, his mother asked him to help with groceries and let him stay up late to watch a movie. She didn't mention the bobcat. Neither did he. But before bed, she said, "You've seemed quiet today." Mason shrugged. "Just thinking." She ruffled his hair. "That brain of yours is always working overtime." He smiled weakly and climbed under his blankets. But even as he stared at the ceiling, eyes wide in the dark, his mind kept replaying the moment Lumen ran. It didn't feel like fear. It felt like preparation. Like something was coming. He didn't know what. But he could feel it pressing just beyond the trees. Waiting. The price of loyalty, a dangerous turn. Real loyalty isn't proven in comfort, it's revealed in the moment everything's at risk. Monday morning broke like any other. Pale sunlight filtered through Mason's window, catching the frost on the glass and setting it aglow. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen. Outside, the world looked peaceful, blanketed in white. But Mason's heart wasn't still. He dressed quickly, layered his clothes, grabbed his backpack, and slipped on his worn boots. His mother, half distracted by her phone and a second cup of coffee, called from the kitchen, "Don't forget, straight to school and straight home, okay?" "Okay," Mason called back, but his voice was hollow. Something about today felt off. His chest was tight. His breath came quicker than usual. Still, he walked. The snow had hardened overnight, forming a crisp crust beneath his steps. Each footfall echoed louder than it should have. The woods around him were silent. Too silent. He passed the creek. Crossed the bridge. Nothing. No flash of gold in the trees. No movement in the shadows. "Lumen," he whispered, turning slowly in place. No answer. His stomach twisted. Maybe he's hunting. Maybe he's nearby, just out of sight. Mason tried to calm himself, pressing forward toward school. But something clawed at the back of his mind, a flicker of unease that wouldn't let go. He reached the last stretch of the trail, a curved patch of road just before the school's entrance. The old pine trees lined both sides, their branches heavy with snow. The road wasn't plowed well here. Cars always slid, tires scraping over packed ice. Mason stepped forward, and that's when he heard it. A screech of tires. A flash of silver. A car was coming too fast, rounding the curve, out of control. Mason froze. He didn't even have time to think. But something moved before he did. A blur. A golden streak from the woods. Lumen. He leapt out of the trees like a bolt of lightning, charging into the road directly in front of the car. There was a terrible screech. A thud. Then silence. The vehicle skidded to a halt, sideways, halfway off the road. Mason stood paralyzed. "Lumen," he choked out, racing forward. The driver, a man in his 30s, flung his door open, pale and shaking. "I didn't see it, I swear, I didn't see anything until it was already there." Mason dropped to his knees in the snow. Lumen lay still on the roadside, golden fur matted with red, breath shallow. His body was twisted, one front leg bent unnaturally, his side rising and falling with painful effort. "No, no, no," Mason whispered, brushing the snow away from Lumen's face. "You didn't have to. Why did you do that? You could have run." Lumen blinked slowly, eyes locking with Mason's. And in that gaze, there was no fear. No pain. Only trust. Only love. By now, others had come running. A teacher. A parent. A crossing guard. Then Ms. Ramirez. "Mason," she gasped, kneeling beside him. "That's the bobcat, Mason, are you okay?" He didn't look at her. His hand was trembling as it hovered over Lumen's side. "He saved me." "What?" He jumped in front of the car. It was coming straight at me. He took the hit. Someone behind them was already on the phone with animal control. Mason's panic surged. "No. No trucks. No traps. Please, he needs a vet. Not a cage. Not a dart." The driver of the SUV, still pale, stepped forward. "There's a vet clinic down the road. I'll take him. I swear. I'll pay. Just help me get him into the car." Ms. Ramirez hesitated. But something in Mason's tear-filled eyes broke through her training, her rules, her doubts. She nodded. They bundled Lumen gently in Mason's coat. He whimpered softly, but never snapped, never resisted. Just let them carry him. His eyes never left Mason. The man placed him carefully in the back seat of his SUV, on top of a wool blanket. Mason climbed in beside him without asking. "I'm coming too." The Evergreen Veterinary Clinic sat at the edge of town, tucked between a fire station and a row of old storefronts. The lights were already on when they arrived. The receptionist gasped when she saw the bundle in Mason's arms. "A bobcat?" "A friend," Mason said softly. Dr. Lindsay Blake, the head vet, took one look at the injured animal and snapped into motion. "Into the back room, now." Mason sat in the waiting room, fingers clutched in his lap, coat streaked with blood. Ms. Ramirez sat beside him, silent. After what felt like hours, Dr. Blake came out. "He's stable," she said gently. "His front leg is broken. A few ribs too. But no internal bleeding. He's lucky." Mason stood slowly. "Can I see him?" Dr. Blake hesitated, then nodded. In the recovery room, Lumen lay curled on a thick blanket, bandages wrapped around his chest. His eyes fluttered open as Mason approached. "Hey, buddy," Mason whispered, crouching beside him. "You didn't have to do that. But I'm so glad you're okay." Lumen let out a soft, low sound, somewhere between a sigh and a purr. Dr. Blake watched from the door, stunned. "He trusts you. I've worked with bobcats before. This is extraordinary." Mason nodded. "He's always been like this. He's not dangerous." Dr. Blake looked thoughtful. "Well, then maybe we should find a way to help him heal without locking him away." Outside, the snow continued to fall. But something had changed. People who once saw a threat now saw a hero. A protector. And a boy who had never fit in had become the center of a story that touched everyone who heard it. A story of wild loyalty. Of sacrifice. Of love. The heart remembers, healing and discovery. Wounds heal, but the memory of love given freely never fades. Lumen didn't return to the forest right away. For the first time in his life, the Wildcat was no longer navigating trees and snowy trails, but recovering under fluorescent lights and a padded recovery kennel at the Evergreen Veterinary Clinic. He didn't seem to mind. He didn't growl or pace like the wild things usually did. Instead, he waited quietly, only alerting the staff with low, gentle sounds when Mason entered the room. And Mason came every day. The first few visits were short. Just a few minutes after school, sitting beside the padded bed where Lumen lay resting, Mason whispering about homework or the weather, or nothing at all. But the more time passed, the more those visits grew into hours. The other patients at the clinic, dogs with sprained legs, cats with dental work, even a goat once, came and went. But Lumen stayed. And so did Mason. Dr. Blake was fascinated. "I've never seen anything like this," she said one afternoon to Ms. Ramirez, who had begun stopping by with Mason every few days. "Most bobcats would have gone feral by now. But not him. He waits for the boy. Watches him like a pup watches its mother." Ms. Ramirez smiled softly, her eyes lingering on the boy curled up in the corner chair, reading aloud to a half-sleeping Lumen. "They found each other in a way most people never will," she whispered. "We'd be foolish not to protect that." The story had reached the local news by then. At first, it was a segment on Channel 9 Denver, "Wildcat saves schoolboy from oncoming vehicle." The footage showed a still photo of Mason sitting beside Lumen, his hand gently laid across the animal's shoulder. From there, it spread. Within days, national news picked it up. A boy and his wildcat. A creature of instinct, sacrifice, and impossible loyalty. And the world listened. Letters arrived at the clinic. Artwork from other children. Plush toys and get-well cards sent to Lumen the Brave. A teacher from Boulder even asked if Mason could Zoom with her class to talk about kindness between species. But none of it mattered to Mason like the quiet moments. He just wanted Lumen to get better. He wanted his friend back. Weeks passed. Winter began to ease its grip, the days growing longer. Slush replaced snow, and icicles dripped steadily from rooftops. Spring teased the edges of evergreen. And slowly, Lumen healed. The cast came off. He started putting pressure on his front leg again. The broken ribs mended, and his appetite returned with a vengeance. Dr. Blake brought in raw meat, gently cooked chicken, even liver. But he still preferred the food Mason brought, small turkey sandwiches or slices of cheddar from home. It became a running joke at the clinic. "Maybe he just likes your seasoning," Dr. Blake teased one day. "No," Mason said quietly. "He just likes me." As Lumen's strength returned, the question no one wanted to ask finally arrived. What happens now? By Colorado law, wild animals, even ones injured and rescued, had to be released back into the wild once they were strong enough. Rehabilitation wasn't ownership. Lumen wasn't a pet. But no one dared to say it directly to Mason. Not yet. It was Dr. Blake who brought it up, gently, as they stood outside the clinic one breezy Friday afternoon. "I know this is hard, Mason. But he belongs to the forest. And soon, he'll be ready to go back." Mason didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed on the horizon, where the mountains cut into the clouds like ancient bones. "I know," he said finally. "I knew it from the beginning." He turned and looked at her. "But I want to be the one to say goodbye. Not in a cage. Not from behind glass." She nodded. "You will." On a mild Sunday in March, Mason stood at the edge of the same trail where it had all started. The snow had mostly melted. Patches of brown grass pushed up through the soil, and the creek sang again, no longer frozen silent. Lumen stood beside him. Stronger now. Bigger than before. But still Lumen. Still his. Dr. Blake stood a few feet back, giving them space. Rachel was there too, her arm wrapped around herself, watching her son with quiet pride. Mason knelt down, his face inches from Lumen's. "I don't know how long you'll stay out there," he whispered. "Maybe you'll find your own kind. Maybe you already did before you found me." Lumen blinked slowly. Mason smiled. "But if you ever come back, I'll be right here." He stood and waited. For a moment, Lumen didn't move. He turned, looked back at the boy. Then, with one final flick of his tail, he disappeared into the trees. No sound. No goodbyes. Only silence. And the space he left behind. In the days that followed, Mason walked the trail alone. At first, the emptiness felt unbearable. The way the wind whispered through the trees without that second set of paw prints. The way the clearing felt, still. But then, something changed. Mason began to notice other things. The tiny woodpecker that tapped near the old bridge. The deer tracks that wound across the trail after rainfall. Even the breeze, cool, but not cold, brushed against his face like a quiet hello. He felt the forest again. Not just as a place he walked through, but as a place that knew him. And somewhere in that vast, wild quiet, he knew Lumen was there. Not watching. Not waiting. Just being. Exactly where he belonged. Wild hearts don't forget. Some goodbyes are just the start of a longer story you didn't know you were still in. A year passed. 12 long months of seasons shifting, snow melting into spring, rain blossoming into summer, leaves falling into gold, and winter once more blanketing the town of Evergreen. Mason Bennett changed too. His glasses were new. He'd grown an inch taller. He still wore his green coat, though it barely zipped now. But his eyes, the deep hazel ones always searching the tree line, were the same. Every so often, someone still asked him about the bobcat. "Hey, did that cat ever come back?" Mason would smile politely. No. But inside, he never believed that was the end. He still walked the same trail each morning. Even when his mom offered to drive. Even when friends said it was easier to just take the bus. Mason never missed the walk. Because a part of him believed that somewhere in the wind, in the rustle of pine, in the hush of snow, Lumen was watching. Not as a ghost. But as something real. Present. Unseen. On Mason's 12th birthday, something changed. It was March again. The air was cold but no longer bitter. Sunlight glistened through gaps in the evergreens, and small rivulets of meltwater trickled beside the path. The forest smelled alive. His mom gave him the day off school. "Just for the morning," she said, pressing a peanut butter sandwich into his backpack. "Go wherever you want." He didn't have to think twice. He chose the old path, the one past the creek, through the clearing where Lumen had first approached him. The snow there was almost gone, the trail damp beneath his boots. Squirrels darted through the underbrush. A red-winged blackbird called from a nearby branch. Mason stopped in the center of the clearing. He didn't speak. He just stood there, eyes closed, listening. A gust of wind swept past, lifting the hair from his forehead. And with it came something he hadn't heard in a year. Soft footfalls on damp earth. He opened his eyes. There, at the far edge of the trail, where the birch trees met the slope, stood Lumen. Bigger now. Stronger. His golden coat shimmered in the early light, and his green eyes locked with Mason's like no time had passed at all. Neither moved. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Mason took one step forward. Lumen didn't run. He didn't leap or growl. He simply sat, just like he used to. Tail curled. Paws still. Mason laughed softly, a sound caught between tears and wonder. "You came back." He didn't approach. He knew better now. Lumen wasn't a pet. He never had been. He was something wilder. Something greater. But this moment, this silent reunion, was enough. They stayed that way for a long time. No movement. No sound. Just memory. And presence. And a friendship that never needed words. Then, slowly, Lumen stood. He turned and looked toward the trees. Behind him, another figure emerged. A second bobcat. Larger. Sleeker. Eyes sharp and wide. Mason's heart jumped. Lumen glanced back once more, at the boy who had been his family, his safety, his world, and then vanished into the woods, his companion following close behind. They didn't look back. And they didn't have to. Mason didn't cry. He didn't chase after him. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, heart full. He understood now. Lumen had healed. Grown. Found his place. And yet, he had returned, if only to let Mason know. He hadn't forgotten. That night, Mason sat at the kitchen table, telling his mom about the moment. "I didn't touch him. I didn't need to," he said, staring into his hot cocoa. "It was enough just to see him." Rachel listened quietly, then nodded. "He came back because he knew you were ready." Mason smiled. "Yeah. I think I was." He paused. "I think, maybe I helped him once. But I think he helped me more." The story of Mason and Lumen became something of a legend in Evergreen. Teachers told it to new students. Kids pointed to the trail and whispered, "That's where it happened." And Mason? He never denied it. But he didn't brag either. He just kept walking the path. Just in case. Not because he needed to see Lumen again. But because that trail had become sacred. A place where something real had happened. Something wild. Something good. Years later, long after Mason had grown into a teenager, a group of hikers stopped in town. They spoke of seeing a pair of bobcats along the ridge trail, unusually calm, one with a distinctive scar on its leg. Mason heard the story and smiled. He didn't ask for photos. He didn't ask for proof. He just whispered, "Thank you," to the wind. Because some friendships never end. They simply change shape. They live in the echoes of paw prints in snow, in the hush of a forest morning, in the unshakable knowing that somewhere out there, a golden shadow watches, and remembers. Always. Some friendships don't begin with words, they begin with quiet steps shared on a snowy trail. Mason and Lumen's story reminds us that the most powerful bonds can be formed through trust, patience, and respect, especially when no one else understands. This isn't just a story about a boy and a wildcat. It's about recognizing the silent connections in our lives, the ones that change us, even if they're never meant to stay forever. It's about knowing when to hold on, and when to let go. And above all, it's about choosing love, even when it asks you to be brave. Here at Paw Prints and Stories, we believe that animals don't just walk through our lives, they leave footprints on our hearts. If this story touched you, stay with us. There are many more untold stories of wild loyalty, unexpected heroes, and the everyday magic between humans and animals. Now, here's a question for you. Have you ever felt a connection with an animal so deep that it changed how you see the world? Think about it, and if you haven't yet, maybe it's still waiting for you, just beyond the trees. We'll be here, ready to tell that story next.